Okay, right. I'm here with Professor Hee-kyoung. She is a professor of law at Hongik University here in Seoul, one of the top universities here in South Korea, of course. And I'm very honored to say that she agreed to be the first guest on this new show, taking the time out of her busy schedule to squeeze me in like this. You've been very generous, and I just wanted to say thank you straight up first.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I'm able to participate.
Yes, now we'll be talking about, of course, President Yoon impeachment trial today and what comes next. But first, before we get to that, I just wanted to devote a little time to get to know you a little better as well. This is something I want to do with each guest that we have on the show, just to get a feel for the person that we're listening to, and not just as an expert, as a person as well. So, with that in mind, then, Professor Chor, could you introduce yourself to our listeners in your own words?
That's always a bit of a challenge for me. So I teach law at Hongik University College of Law, which is located here in Seoul. It's a very vibrant neighborhood, very famous for its live band scene and artsy studios, etc., and a big tourist attraction. I was just reading an article this morning saying that Hongdae has surpassed Gangnam as the must-go-to area for in Seoul. It's apparently the second most popular subway destination in Seoul. So I grew up in Korea, but I've also spent quite a lot of time abroad, living in Australia, working in England, and various other places. I just found out today that I'm actually an alumna of Changho.
Yeah,
We went to
yes. So you studied at SOAS for a little bit as well.
for just under a year
Mm.
studying Chinese, but I don't speak any anymore. So.
I understand as well that you initially actually studied music, right? I saw that on your bio on the website here.
I really need to go and go and tidy up their bio. Seriously, I did.
Okay.
I actually wanted to. It was never in my plan to study law initially. I actually wanted to be like Dr. Schweitzer and become a doctor and go and rescue people and treat them. So doing doctoring during the day and playing music at night.
Mm.
And I actually studied music at university for a year, but I realized fairly quickly that that wasn't really my way, and I was casting around for what to do. And I came across a book about a first generation Korean human rights lawyer who's actually a distant relative, and I got inspired by that. When I started the study of law, I was a little bit concerned if I would be able to do it, because obviously English is not my first language, not even my second language, and there is a lot more
What's your second language?
Japanese.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So there's a lot more oral arguments that go on. You have to be, to be able to litigate in common law jurisdiction, you have to be a lot more eloquent and fluent. And I wasn't sure if I would have that, if I would be able to sort of get that kind of skill. Whereas in Korea, the litigation is actually, it used to be certainly mostly done by paper.
Mm.
Everything's kind of documents. So that was an extra challenge.
So, as we said, you've been all over the world for your career, the US, the UK, Iraq, and Mongolia as well. I think I saw in your bio.
Oh gosh, seriously.
But you have experience in
Yeah.
intellectual property law, media law, and human rights, right? What areas are you most interested in?
So I was the in-house counsel for an international news agency for many years, and so that obviously drew me to media law. But my main area of interest originally was really human rights law and media with freedom of expression, etc. That is certainly an area of focus. And at the same time, I'd always been interested in intellectual property area like copyright, patents, etc. Sort of turning ideas into commercialized things, and so that's another specialization of mine.
When I said that I wanted to ask you about your history in a pre-interview, You said you didn't want to go too much into your personal details, but you did want to maybe say why you do what you do.
Oh, I don't mind. I don't know if I said I don't necessarily want to go into personal details. I just thought it might be not so interesting for your listeners. But anyway, why do I do what do I do? As I said earlier, law was never, you know, at the uppermost of my mind when I was thinking about my choice of career. And so I kind of fell into it by accident. But I think I certainly had a very strong sense of justice from an early age. And that might have something to do with the fact that I'm a second born child. So I don't know what your family order is if you're the firstborn. I'm
I'm the
thinking
second
not.
born as well.
Okay,
Yes.
but do you have a younger sibling?
No young siblings. So I'm the
See,
youngest child.
that makes a difference.
I
you
know
see. I'm the middle
exactly what you're
child.
saying.
So-
Yes. My wife is a middle child as well.
Oh, I
So yes,
see.
I've
Yeah,
been
so you can
seeing that
relate,
dynamic as well.
right?
Yes.
So you end up sort of, developing a strong sense of what's, right and what's not, and what's fair and what's not. And so that plus it is as if I've sort of been always a member of the minority. In Korea, at least certainly when I was growing up, the girls were much more discriminated against than boys. And then when I was living abroad, you are uh, ethnically, racially, etc., linguistically in the minority group, and so I think that also shaped certainly some of my outlook on life and what I think should how I think society should be organized.
So what brought you back to South Korea? You've been all over the world. What brought you back to South Korea? And how has it been for you since you've come back?
So I came back because of my husband, who moved continents twice for me. And he really wanted to come to Korea to work. And so I thought it was my turn to give way. And so most people think that it was because of me that we came back to Korea. And it was really by chance that I happened to uh, be become a professor at Hongik University. But even when I was practicing as a lawyer, I always thought I would eventually go and teach. And so that's what I'm doing now, and I really love it.
You've been a political commentator for a lot of English language media outlets here in
Right.
Korea, KBS World, Arirang, the Korea Times. What are your overall thoughts on Korean politics since you've been back? I don't know how many years it's been, but when you've been here and seeing how Korean politics has progressed and how it's all playing out, especially in recent months and years, what have you thought about Korean politics?
That's a tough question. And, for a long time, I wondered if I really had the right or even sort of the wherewithal to actually comment on Korean politics because I had been away for such a long time and I really didn't have that much close experience or insight into what was going on here. And particularly when I first came back and sort of that was under Lee Myung-bak's government. And things just felt so strange and there were so many things that I couldn't quite understand and couldn't really comprehend why was this happening. I mean, this is just not logical, not sensible, and it doesn't really benefit anybody. And it really was very puzzling. But I kind of refrained from criticizing or commenting on it because I thought, well, I don't really understand, and I'm not really an insider, and I didn't feel that I have the right to comment on it. But then I was sort of hearing all these commentators, especially in the English media, in Korea, of people were making comments based on wrong facts and just twisting things and I felt that this was not quite right because and many of the commentators were foreigners living in Korea and I wasn't even sure if they could read Korean or understand it and whether they had actually even come across the original news source that they were talking about. And so I thought, I don't really know that much, but I think I know a little bit more than they do. And so my main sort of aim at the beginning was to try to present the correct picture, because there are people living in Korea who don't necessarily speak or read Korean, and English news is what they have to go by. Not to mention, people abroad, and so that's how I got into it, I think.
Well, we're, I think, all very thankful that you did, because your insights have been very illuminating in recent years, I would say. And you're so eloquent in how you talk about your arguments and present what's going on in Korea. I think people really appreciate that. I
Thank
would
you,
say so.
Jang-ho.
And I think as well, because Korean politics, as you said, there's so much going on here, and it's so different from Western politics as well, that there is someone who needs to kind of decipher and help, bridge that gap. And also because I think Korean politics is so exciting.
It's certainly very
It's
dynamic.
very dynamic, definitely not boring. And but because of that, I think a lot can get muddied, a lot can get confused, and so
And there is so much context, both socially, culturally, and historically. And unless you understand that context, you don't really understand why are these people behaving in this way. For example, you look at the Conservative Party now, the 국민의힘 Party, and you think they are not a political party. Why? And they're supposed to be the main conservative party in Korea, and you don't understand why are they behaving in this way? Why are they like this? Why are they not doing the very basic things that they should do as a political party? And it's not until you understand their origins and how they came to be today that you realize, okay, so that's why they're acting in this way.
what do you mean by that? Can you expand on that a little bit for us? What do you mean that the Conservative Party isn't acting in a way that a Conservative Party should?
Well, we think that usually a political party is gathered around certain belief systems and issues, and they have a certain philosophy or an outlook on life and on how society should be organized and what their role is, and they do try to come up with policies, etc., etc. But 국민의힘 is basically the descendant of the back in the days when we had the series of coups. So essentially, they are not a political party that's organized around the usual belief system a political party is organized. It's mainly just a group of people who are interested in grabbing and holding on to power, and they are prepared to do whatever they need to do to hold on to that power, and hence basically adopting or importing a complete stranger. I'm talking about Yoon Yeol here, who had no affiliation with their party whatsoever, who wasn't even a politician for his entire life, and taking him in and making him into their presidential candidate. No proper political party would ever do that kind of thing. I mean, can you imagine, the Republican Party doing that? The
Well,
CDU or CSU in Germany doing that?
well, we've
Or
seen that happening in the US.
well, yeah, but with the Trump phenomenon, I think it's a little bit different because Trump had been, although he wasn't in the political arena directly, he was acting politically for a long time, I think, and certainly he was a Democrat in the past, and he switched his allegiance, but you can point to certain things that he was doing, in the past years that sort of led you to think, okay, this is not so crazy as you might think. But Yoon's case was definitely, just something completely out of the left field.
Do you think there could be similar criticisms made of the Democratic Party of Korea, the the supposedly left party, but there are a lot of people who say we're not sure what the principles of the Democratic Party are anymore either.
Right. So this is why I think the categorization of our political parties is completely wrong. So first of all,
In Korea
in
or
Korea,
yeah.
in Korea.
Okay.
So 국민의힘 is not a conservative party. You know, you can't really call them a conservative party. I would say that the Democratic Party is more of a conservative, or at least kind of middle of the road, leaning to the right party. They are not, as most people say, the progressive party. And we have a big hole where the progressive politics should be in Korea. You know, the Justice Party has just gone, you know, self-imploded. We've got smaller parties like the Green Party and a couple of others coming up, but they are still so tiny that you can't really, you know, count them as having a meaningful presence, although I'm hoping that they will grow. And so the Democratic Party is certainly much more conservative rather than progressive. And in the past, I used to really despair of them because of their internal conflict and factionalization and silos and rivalry and all that. But I think they really sort of cleaned up their act, and they certainly they are certainly pulling their weight, particularly kind of with this the self-coup, the illegal martial law crisis. I think they are so doing the things that people are expecting of them, and so it's really helped to take a fresh look at the National Assembly and what lawmakers we've elected are supposed to be doing. So,
I mean, I do want to talk about the impeachment trial, but that does lead me to just one more quick question then before we get onto that, and that is, what have you made of Lee Jae-myung, especially his unpopularity in Korea at the moment? He's seen by, I would say, the general public, a lot of the general public, as a problematic figure. He has, of course, a very strong support base, but when we see polls, it doesn't go, his approval rating doesn't go above really 40%. He can't seem to grab the majority of public support. And there is this image, I would say, obviously not been proven yet, but of a crooked politician. What do you make of those kind of image that they have of him?
yeah, also not an easy question. I have to confess that I myself didn't necessarily have a very good impression of Lee Jae-myung, and so it's not a easy question to answer, because I think a lot of our perception is so colored by the very negative press, media coverage of Lee Jae-myung. And I was thinking about, why is it that he gets such bad press? It's actually almost difficult to separate the real Lee Jae-myung from how he's portrayed in the media. And certainly there are, unsavory episodes that you read about. He's, sort of strife with his own family members, and the way he sort of, passed himself off as a prosecutor, etc., etc., etc. But when you sort of get into details, you also realize how much it's been exaggerated and some of it incorrectly portrayed. I still am not entirely sure how I feel about him as a politician, because for me, he's sometimes too much of a populist and too much of an opportunist. But then, having said that, which politician isn't? and the thing about Lee Jae-myung is, I once had a conversation with someone I sort of really respected in terms of their informed knowledge about Korean politics. And he was asking, who do you think is more admirable? Somebody who inherited their wealth and their power and what they have, or someone who is born with nothing and actually pull themselves up by the bootstraps and got to where they are. And I said, of course you'd admire the latter more than the former. And he says, yes, you're right. But in reality, people actually are more attracted to the former rather than the latter. And I think that's got a lot to do with the way we have treated and we still treat some of our leaders who come from, not so privileged backgrounds. It was the same with Roh Moo-hyun, and I think it's the same with Lee Jae-myung.
Do you think that's a bit more of a Korean thing almost?
No, I think it's also in other countries as well. I once again read on the weekend how Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, spent 5 years getting elocution lessons to try to correct his, I don't know what kind of accent he originally had. And the article was complaining how he used to sound much more, prime ministerial rather than his, corrected,
Right.
RP pronunciation, C pronunciation.
Right.
And I was thinking, I mean, I really used to admire Keir Starmer for his human rights work that he did and all of that. And so he obviously felt that there was some sort of lack, within him, and he some sort of, lacking self-confidence or whatever, and trying to fit in and trying to sound as if like what he thinks a leader should sound like in Britain. And so I think it's everywhere. I mean, also partly, so we talked about Trump before, but part of the reason why people, tend to like Trump is because he is a billionaire, although there's a lot of skepticism about this.
Sorry,
but
a big...
he's a very successful businessman.
Right,
He's
okay.
incredibly
Yeah,
wealthy,
sure.
and I think that's also part of the thing that he brings with him to the job.
We'll leave that there and actually talk about the big issue of the moment, and that is the impeachment trial, of course. Today, at the time of recording, the 10th hearing is taking place today in the impeachment trial. We don't know if there will be more hearings at the moment, but it does seem like this is going to be the last, or at least near the last, and the final arguments are going to come later as well. And a ruling on the impeachment is expected to come mid-March. That's what it looks like. So we are nearing the end. Professor, from what you've seen so far, what we know so far about the impeachment trial, of course, there might be something new that comes out today, but what have you made of it so far, especially as a legal expert? The trial itself.
The trial itself seems to be, at last, the only normal thing that is actually going on surrounding the whole martial law and all of that. But it seems as if one side is actually making proper legal arguments, whereas the other side is simply using this as a platform to send more messages of incitement to the supporters of Yoon, and they're not really making proper defense as they should. But at the same time, they may not really have a proper defense to make.
Well, that's going to be my question as well. What are the key factors that the justices are looking at to make their ruling? What is the crux of this impeachment case, would you say?
So an impeachment trial is almost like a unique kind of trial in terms of characteristic, because it's not penalizing the person that's on the stand. It's looking at whether the person has committed such a serious breach of the constitution or the law that they are no longer fit to serve in their public office. And so that's what the justices will be looking at. And, based on all the evidence that's been presented in the court, I think they certainly do have a sense of the continued and repeated and stubborn resistance of Yoon to upholding the constitution.
Right, a lot of the hearings that we've seen have been about trying to get to the bottom of exactly what orders Yoon gave and when. And we've heard from various senior military and government figures. They've been given conflicting testimonies and statements. Did he order the arrest of politicians or not? Did he order lawmakers to be dragged out of the National Assembly to stop the vote to rescind the martial law or not? But my question is, are those details actually important in this case? Because from what I've seen, these seem to be points that would be important in his criminal case for whether he incited an insurrection or not. But for the constitutional court case, it seemed to me that the crux of the case should be whether declaring martial law was constitutional or not.
Chung-ho, you've answered the question yourself, seriously. Because that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, so much focus has been on what did he say, 의원, 요원, or 인원, so agent or lawmaker or persons, and it really doesn't matter at all in this impeachment trial. As you said, it might matter in the criminal trial, but even without that, the behavior he exhibited when he was called to answer questions by the authorities, by the CIO, the Corruption Investigation Office, by the prosecution, or by the police, the way he completely rejected their request to attend for questioning, and then basically turning the compound into sort of like this fortified fortress and telling the security guards to, use knife if you have to try to prevent the police from coming in to make a lawful arrest, which only became necessary because he refused to attend questioning. And so just based on that, plus the fact that he didn't meet any of the legal process in declaring that martial law on that night, no, not procedurally, not substantively, those alone would be, I think, enough to make grounds for impeachment. If we remember back to Park Geun-hye's impeachment trial, when you read the judgment, it's very clear that it wasn't the corruption, the bribery, etc., etc. It was the fact that she consistently refused to comply with the orders from the court and the legal process. That was held to be the biggest ground.
I'm sure all of our listeners are aware, but just to cover our bases, we should just explain that President Yoon is facing impeachment at the Constitutional Court. But there's a separate trial going on at the criminal courts for treason or insurrection charges for declaring martial law last December. Now, these two trials are essentially progressing concurrently, but the impeachment trial is nearing its end now, while the criminal trial is just getting started. I believe they are holding the first hearing today as well. I guess the argument constitutionally for President Yoon's impeachment trial for Yoon and his supporters is that the power to declare martial law is the president's prerogative, that the president has that power, and you can call martial law at times of national emergency, and he deemed the country was in a state of national emergency with the way the country was going, with the opposition hampering the government's job and possible election fraud taking place, and that it was a national emergency. What should we make of that argument?
As you said, it is the president's prerogative to declare martial law, but you have to meet very specific legal requirements. Either you have a war or warlike conditions, or a national emergency where the civil order breaks down so completely and irretrievably that you cannot leave it up to the ordinary administrative or executive agencies to restore the order. And that's the reason for declaring martial law and granting these unbelievable special powers to one person, the martial law commander. But we didn't have that kind of situation. Okay, so the president might have been frustrated by the National Assembly, but the origin of that was actually on him because he kept refusing to, execute and declaring laws that have been validly passed through the National Assembly. He was the one who actually refused to meet the opposition party even, and even come to the opening of the National Assembly, something that hadn't been done since the inception of the Republic of Korea. And so those kind of problems could have been easily resolved by political process, by dialogue, by communication. And the electoral fraud, again, there has been something like 135 separate investigations and inquiries, and no fraud, electoral fraud has been found. There was a couple of anomalies that have been addressed, but that didn't mean that there was an election fraud that he claimed. And so what he's arguing has absolutely no basis in reality, and it's really in his imagination, in this virtual reality that he lives in, thanks to his addiction to these far right wing YouTube videos, I think.
I was curious about the Constitutional Court itself as well, because it does seem very different from a criminal court that I think most people will be more familiar with. Can you tell us about the Constitutional Court in Korea, the powers that it has, how it's different from criminal court, and how it compares to other countries as well? I'm not sure if you know.
The Constitutional Court is obviously very different to a criminal court. I mean, we don't necessarily have a specialized criminal court. A criminal trial is usually heard in the general court that also hears civil trials as well. Constitutional Court was set up in 1987 with the new constitution that was enacted back then, and it's very much sort of modeled on the Constitutional Court of Germany. So it is tasked to interpret. Basically, it can hear 4 different types of trials. I won't go through all of them, but impeachment trial of very high level public officials is one, and I can also go to the Constitutional Court if I feel that one of my basic rights that is supposed to be protected under the Constitution is being infringed, and I want to have that addressed. You can also complain about a law if you think that that law is unconstitutional, for example. And so the Constitutional Court's specific job is to protect and guard the Constitution and interpret laws that may not interpret but decide whether a law is constitutional or not. And it also decides on the various powers of the government that are set out under the Constitution. So currently, another separate trial that's going on before the Constitutional Court is the powers of the National Assembly and the President. And there's like a kind of competing question as to who has the power to decide what, and so that's another one of those jurisdictions.
What's the reputation of the Constitutional Court like in Korea? Has it traditionally been seen as a fair body, or is it a body that has perhaps been swayed by the political winds of the time? The justices, they're appointed somewhat politically as well, right?
Right, yes, because there are 9 justices altogether on the Constitutional Court. 3 are nominated by the Supreme Court Justice, 3 are nominated by the National Assembly, and 3 by the President. And so you could certainly argue that 6 nominations at least could be quite political. And the Supreme Court Justice is actually appointed by the President too. So that could potentially be political as well. However, I would say that for the first 30 years of its life, the Constitutional Court really didn't have much of a presence. There were some important cases, but there were also some very controversial cases, like the case on whether it was unconstitutional to move the capital to Sejong City. And the Constitutional Court found this completely unheard of customary law that the capital of Korea is Seoul. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. But that's what the court decided. And there is no further appeal from the Constitutional Court. And so that's where it stands now. But throughout the years, it actually has decided many important issues that really has shaped the culture and society. And it's more kind of a reflection of society rather than shaping, unlike the common law jurisdictions. And so through the accumulation of these cases, I think the Constitutional Court has certainly gained much more reputation and much more trust. And people argue that judges are political, but I think actually they are not as political as those who actually appointed the judges want them to be.
Right.
And you can certainly see that from the previous impeachment cases and also political cases. For example, the Sejong city capital case, the ruling administration back then really wanted the court to say, yes, you can move to Sejong and it's not unconstitutional. But the court came to the complete opposite decision. Also, the court that impeached Park Geun-hye, most of the justices were appointed in her times. And again, in this impeachment trial, so much ink had been spilled on how at least 3 are on the side of Yoon, and 2 are diehard in the rule conservative. But at the end of the day, these are judges who have been lawyers most of their lives, and I think their loyalty is to the law. Or at least I want to believe that their loyalty is to the law.
Right, and I guess there could be some concerns that are being raised by people that the justices hold a lot of power. They are the 9 justices, or 8, we should say currently, they are deciding the fate of the nation with President Yoon's impeachment, whether to ratify it or not. But it seems to be a lot at their discretion, or is that an unfair characterization? And also, there's no system of appeal as well. There are concerns about due process, I guess, whether the president is being given enough right to defend himself. Also, the time frame, it's very quick compared to a criminal court. We're just talking this resolving in weeks rather than months or years like they do in criminal courts. And it seems quite a short turnaround for decisions that are so important.
I think the judges are actually bending over backwards to ensure that the how would you say, impeached side, the Yoon side, is actually getting due process. Seriously, if it were an ordinary trial, you wouldn't have so much oral arguments. Most of it would be on paper, and it would be like in the courtroom. The judge will ask, and have you all read, such and such document, and do you all agree? Do you have any comments, objections, etc.? If not, we shall adopt them. That's the kind of thing. And so, actually calling so many witnesses that Yoon's side has requested, and today's hearing also is an extra date, including also the Tuesday's hearing. These were extra dates that were scheduled specifically at the request of Yoon's team. And it's been, I think more than 2 months since the court actually convened to hear this impeachment trial, because it began on the 15th of December, right after the impeachment motion passed in the National Assembly. And if you look at it and compare it to the previous 2 impeachment cases that we had with Roh Moo-hyun and Park Geun-hye, both were shorter. Park Geun-hye's case only took 66 days. Roh Moo-hyun's case took less than that. And this trial is actually much more simple because we only have one issue, whereas Park Geun-hye's trial had many more issues and much more complicated set of facts. And so they had to hear a lot more evidence. And so I don't think it's being rushed. The court is certainly making sure that the defendant's side gets more than sufficient. They might feel that it's not sufficient, but that they get enough time to present their case and make their defense really. And they are also very conscious of the fact that it is, and like you said, it's going to determine the fate of the nation. We are kind of suspended at the moment with everything being uncertain, and that's really having such a huge impact on our economy, on our politics, that we have to prepare ourselves for the upcoming negotiations, right, with the Trump team. And we don't even know who the leader is of the nation, and so they're cognizant of that, and so they want to have a timely decision. Just because it takes longer doesn't mean that there's going to be more cogent evidence that's going to come out. How much the claimant side, the National Assembly, has really finished the presentation of its case, and it's really up to the defendant side, but they haven't really used the time to make proper defense in any case. And the witnesses that they have called, thinking that they will be friendly, actually have given evidence that's really unfavorable to Yoon. And so those arguments that say, oh, the court is not giving due process, they're making it too fast, the process is too quick, there's not enough time, it's all a part of that tactic to try to delay this trial, and that's really certainly not good for anybody except Yoon.
Well, that leads us to our ultimate question for today, and that is, how do you think the court will rule?
Oh, it will be ratified, no question. 8-0, unanimous decision.
How confident are you in
100%.
that? You're 100% confident in that?
100% confident.
There was that case with the broadcast watchdog chief recently and her case, and
Right.
that her impeachment was nullified. It was
Yep.
split 4-4, supposedly down political lines. And that has perhaps sowed some seeds of doubt, I guess, with some people, that there are concerns.
Then they're not looking at the facts of that case and the facts of Yoon's case. In that case, the Broadcasting Commission chair, she was only in the job for like less than a day, and so the logic was, well, what could she have done that was so terrible that it's an impeachable offense? And there was much, a lot of things that were really objectionable about her, and I really don't think she's qualified to lead the Broadcasting Commission chief, who should really be independent and objective. And she's so completely prejudiced and not impartial that she really doesn't deserve to be in that post. But that's not ground for impeachment.
I'm sure, yes, I know all signs point to President Yoon's impeachment, that the court will rule that way. But I think for a lot of people, there is just a little nagging doubt. What if? What if his impeachment is not upheld? What happens then? You don't have any doubt in your mind, you're saying?
I have
then?
absolutely no doubt in my mind. Can you imagine if it's not nullified, if the action is if it's not ratified and it's nullified, and Yoon goes back to the presidential office? Can you imagine what will happen?
It would be
I'm sure
chaotic. I understand, but because of that, I think that we have that fear. A lot of people have that fear.
I'm certain that the justices will be unanimously voting to ratify the motion to impeach.
That's the sort of thing that would happen, and I think that would lead to sort of an existential crisis for the nation, essentially. Especially because although there is support for President Yoon and for the PPP, the ruling People Power Party, still polls show that something like 70% of people believe President Yoon should be impeached.
Yes, and it's not really even a question of polls anymore, because once he's back in the office, what will he do but declare another martial law? And this time he will be bringing on much more force. Now, the military might actually object and not comply with the orders, but then he will just bring other people who will in their place. and he will just continue doing that. And so he will. I am almost certain that there will be a bloodbath if he is returned to the office. Literally.
There's concern of quote-unquote bloodbath if President Yoon is impeached as well.
We are talking about some sort of
We saw the storming of the courthouse when President Yoon's indictment, I think, was...
yeah, but at the
ratified.
moment it's actually being incited by the ruling party. But once the impeachment is ratified, they no longer have any interest in maintaining that line, and any small riots will be easily controlled by the police, who will be supporting the maintaining of the order.
The Conservative Party at the moment seem to be digging their heels in to support President Yoon. So you're saying you believe that will switch?
That will switch once he's impeached. Yeah, for sure.
Well, there was, of course, more I wanted to talk to you about today, but we are out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. Professor Choi, it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you today, and I hope our listeners found it fascinating as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you once again for accepting my request for you to be the first guest on our show, and I hope we can have you on the show again soon.
Chang-ho, I was also, eager to ask you questions because I'm interested in what you think about, the whole situation and everything. So I hope there will be another opportunity.
Yes,
so thank you
maybe
very much
next
for
time.
inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.